Welcome to Creation in the 21st Century. I'm your host, Carl Ball, founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. We have a program for you today that hopefully will influence your life. It's titled The Amazing Ear. Now, my guest is a very special guest. In fact, I've sat under scores of professors. I know many scores more of these unique individuals, but of all these professors, my favorite is Professor M.E. Clark, University of Illinois. And there's a reason for that, and as I greet him, we'll talk about that. M.E., it is always a delight to have you on the program.
It's always nice to be here, Carl.
Over these years, now, you've made, I think this is your 40th trip to Glen Rose, because of the unique evidence at Glen Rose.
Amen.
And then you have been on this program off and on since 2000. One of my favorite guests and my specific favorite professor.
Well, thanks, Carl.
Now, there are reasons for that. You know, I've told a number of audiences on a global scale that we think of our mom and dad most every day. We think of our kids most every day, but there are very few people in the world we think of every day. Now, believe it or not, I think of you every day of my life.
That's because you travel a lot.
Now, that is an intelligent answer, because decades ago, I held to the gap theory and progressive creation. And I felt that the dinosaurs were tucked into the geologic column, like 228 million years ago up to 64 million years ago. I held to that old age position.
I think I'd had some of those thoughts also.
All right, an honest confession, good for the soul. But Emmy, you were the professor that changed the orientation of my thinking to see that the road cuts, and that's the reason you said, I travel a lot, so I think of you. Every time I see a road cut, every time I see an embankment of sedimentary layering, either consciously or subconsciously, I think of you. Because you're the one, along with your colleague, Dr. Henry Voss at University of Illinois, who formulated the computerized program and demonstrated that in the flume to show that these sedimentary layers we see in the road cut were laid down, by and large, during the worldwide flood. Is that correct?
That's a real witness to the flood. The road cut is a perfect example that most everybody can see every day.
Yes, and that's one of the reasons I think of you every day, and then I think of you because I like you. And then you add to that what we've discovered at Glen Rose, and you've been in on most of these discoveries. You've been there for most of the excavations. We have an entire trail called the Clark Trail, large human footprints, and you have a large foot.
Yeah.
Large.
A lot of understanding down there.
A lot of, very good. An entire trail of human footprints where we remove the overburden and excavated these trails. There's no question that they're human footprints, no question they're among dinosaur footprints. So when you add the composite of your influence on me in the sedimentary layering and then examining that sedimentary layering, your participation, you're my favorite professor.
Thanks, Carl. You're my favorite TV host.
Oh, good. Yeah, I'm the only one you know personally, so that works beautifully. We're having fun. Now, in addition to that, let's lead into today's unique contribution that you're making to this audience. You've spent how many years, how many decades studying and demonstrating as a fluid dynamicist over 40 years in the graduate division, the University of Illinois, as a fluid dynamicist, tenured professor over 40 years. You're a professor emeritus now. Of course, you know all of this, but the audience needs to know this. How many of these years have you studied about the human cardiovascular system?
I think I started back about 1960, And so it's putting you half a decade, half a century.
Half a century. Marvelous. Now, in the last 10 months, you've been majoring on the study of the human ear and its unique characteristics. Is that right?
That's right. It's not hard to study a topic like that because of our internet these days. And then there's lots of good textbooks and illustrated books that feature the ear. I've studied the textbooks and I've studied the internet, and I don't profess to be an expert on the ear, but I have studied it for a while, and I think I put you to understand what it's all about. I'm not sure that everybody gets the right idea about the ear.
And as we start to expose this information on the amazing ear, the audience needs to understand that this ear is only one part, a unique but a contributory part of a physiology that is fearfully and wonderfully made. And when we examine the traits of the ear and characteristics that you're going to point out, the audience needs to know that the ear can't function by itself. It requires the supporting organs, the brain, the feedback, central and peripheral nervous systems, and the autonomic nervous systems in its function. So we are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Yes, we have a wonderful system, and I like to emphasize the idea of a system. It all works together, and you can't get rid of one part without doing great damage to the rest.
Yes. Well, will you take us down the trail? And as Professor Clark is getting ready to take us down the trail, he's done such a wonderful job analyzing the fluid dynamics of the human body that much of the brain surgery that is done today takes advantage of his work in the entire human cardiovascular system. Okay, Professor, please take us down the road.
Well, Da Vinci is a common name these days, and I pulled out a quote from him that says, "Human subtlety will never devise an invention more beautiful, more simple, or more direct than nature, because in her inventions nothing is lacking and nothing is superfluous." Now, I don't think too much of attributing all this wonderful design to Mother Nature, but I would like to change Da Vinci a little bit, and here's a modification of it. Human subtlety will never devise an invention more beautiful, more simple, or more direct than our divine designer has done in designing the human ear, because in his inventions we find irreducible complexity.
Well stated.
I think Da Vinci was kind of referring to irreducible complexity way back in the 1500s when he says here, lacking nothing, nothing is superfluous.
Everything in its place, nothing too much.
Now, one of the things that is, I think, commonly known, that design in the human body is obvious. I have a couple of quotes here from some evolutionists that more or less prove that. Biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. This was Francis Crick in his book, The Mad Pursuit.
Trying to override the obvious that everything is designed, but trying to override that with an evolutionary presupposition.
I think that's an apt title to his book. You have to be somewhat mad to be engaged in that kind of intellectual pursuit. Here's another one of his. An honest man, armed with all the knowledge available to us now, could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to be almost a miracle. I question almost.
Well stated, Professor.
If you want to get a good quote, let's go to the Apostle Paul in Romans 1:18 through 20. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold down the truth in unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them. It's obvious to them. For God hath shown it unto them. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made.